Hello. I'm pleased to say that I'm willing and able and ready to shoot another video. I've got a pile of books here that I'm can't wait to dig in, because some of these books are close to my heart. Other of these books are brand new because I just bought them. So what I'd like to do today is to talk about Berlin, because clearly this is the channel for it. Here's a book I've got. This is one that I actually bought recently. It's called Berlin by Sinclair McKay. I was intrigued to buy this book. This, I think, was published in 2023. I'm a great big fan of books that were written at the time as these things were, as history was unfolding, as you could say. But what I'm trying to do is not to discriminate against any author on Berlin, whether they had a book published last week or 10 years ago or maybe even 20 years ago. I've now drawn the conclusion that as a result of my interest, and I always looking for documents clearly, or books in book form and diaries in book form, I've now drawn the conclusion that it doesn't matter who the historian is. It doesn't matter if the historian is German or American or British or even French. It doesn't matter if the book had been published last week or published during the events, these historic events that Berlin went through. It's best to cover all grounds, and clearly this was one of them. So I was when I saw this book, I said, yeah, I've got to have it. Also, it reads quite well, because I like to read like a page or two of the book, and I would and the angle, of course, of the author is clearly taken. Now I would compare it to this one. This is called Berlin Story, and this is a book that I had before. It was by Kurt Reese, Berlin Story. This is one of my favourites, and it's in my top 10. Why? Because the author was there at the time as history was unfolding. So he was there throughout the post-war years from 1945 to 1953, and that was when, around about the time that he finished writing it and he decided to publish it. And he himself is a Berliner, or an echter Berliner, as opposed to, say, this book. So it's a historian looking back, but clearly he's not able to live the events, whereas this author, Kurt Reese, was able to actually live the experience. He actually experienced the experience, and that's what makes this book priceless to me. But I won't dismiss this book. It's just a book of Berlin, and it takes another angle from a historian who's looking back at the time. I mean, it must be really difficult, because there's no time machine. You can't go back in time and observe as things are happening. You have to do the best you can with the materials that you have, and create a book in such a way that it will stand out from all the others. So anyway, so this is Berlin by Sinclair McKay. Okay, let's see. Talking of books that were written at the time, this is one of the first books I ever got on Berlin. This is called The Ides of August, The Berlin Wall Crisis, 1961, by Curtis, is that Katie? Is that, or Catty? And you've got the author at the back of the book, which, a picture of the author at the back of the book, which I think is fabulous. This is, like I say, one of the first books, and this was written, I think this was published in 1978. So it was. So he's looking at from the 60s and the 50s a point of view. So if I look here, yeah, 1978 it was published, 1978, and then I have, and then it says here, Niemand hat die Absicht, eine Mauer zu erreichen, and that means, translated, nobody intends to erect a wall. And Walter Ulbricht said this June 15th, 1961, and Eid means middle, so middle of August, so it was the 13th, a Sunday, when the wall was erected. Now, if you can see this book here, I have this one, which is Reis durch Berlin. So it has a completely different cover and a completely different title. The author's is the same author. It's just that this book is written in German. Even the photos in the book are different. And I think it's interesting from the perspective of actually having a book written by someone who's not a Berliner, you know, somebody who's from the outside looking in. So I wasn't, when I ordered this book, I wasn't really sure if I had a copy of this book. So, and this is what happens, is a lot of times you have books and then you all of a sudden get doubles of these books. But I'm not too fussed about this one. Why? Because this is in German and this is in English. And what I would do is I would read them in tandem with each other. So I'd get the understanding of the German, and it actually helps. It helps improve my German, but it also, you know, I get it from two different languages, so German and English. And when you do that, you suddenly, you might see the meaning of certain sentences could be slightly different. So, you know, or there could be things that are sort of lost in translation. But I prize these books. So having the English, having the English one here and then the German one there, is for me to be able to compare and contrast. So this book is called The Ides of August, The Berlin Wall Crisis 1961 by Curtis Catty or Kate, and this one is Reis durch Berlin, so that tear through Berlin, it says, that's the translation, tear through Berlin. 13th of August 1961, which was a Sunday. So yeah, it's handy, especially if you're a language learner, or if you're somebody who can speak two languages already. It's always good to actually have two of the same books, but both in different languages. All right. So here's another one that I've got two copies of. This one's The Death of Hitler, and it says the final word at the bottom there, and you see him with his famous moustache there. And then there's this was the latest, and when I bought this I thought, I bet I've got this book at home, and sure enough I see that I have. But I'm not too fussed at the fact that I have two copies, simply because this is the book that I can carry in my bag to work. So I can get this out and I can read it, whereas this is a bit bulky, you know, and I don't want to damage a hardback, you know, because, well, why would you? You know, you want to keep a book in good condition on your bookshelf, whereas this one I know I can easily replace. And the other thing about this, I can annotate it, so I can underline things, I can highlight things, I can write in the margins. I can fold pages if I want to, but that's if I want to. Here, this is a really interesting book in the sense that they were able to go to the Russian archive. The authors here, by Jean Christopher Brissard and Lana Parshina, they were able to go to the archives in Russia, and part of the book is they give their description as to what they did when they were there and the documents that they had access to. And of course, if you can't speak Russian or you can't read Russian, how are you going to be able to decipher the documents? But there are pictures like that where you can actually see that pictures of the documents that they have in their archive. Now with the war in Ukraine, of course, you know, it probably might be harder for a historian to have access to the archives. And then, of course, you have to have somebody who can actually read, not only read them, but understand the documents. You know, you have to have an understanding. It's almost like somebody who can read English and read a law book or read a book on medicine, and you have no understanding about medicine or law. You can read the words because you can read English, but when it comes to reading the documents, the same sort of thing. You think, well, do you understand what they're trying to say? So it really does need like a Russian historian that not only can understand what the documents are saying, but can convey it in such a way to those that need that, you know, like an English or an American historian, that they understand so that they can go ahead and write their book. And because I'm someone who has a healthy obsession for documents, I'm really fascinated for the fact that they actually include it in their book. You know, it's not like they're just talking about the last days of Hitler in his bunker. What they're talking about is the documents that they had to have access to, and not only that, but actually understand what these documents actually said. A lot of the documentation was done by the KGB, because they were interrogating the survivors of the Hitler bunker. And of course they were being interrogated multiple times. It wasn't just once or twice, it was multiple times, and it must have been very, very hard on these people to have to go through the interrogation over and over and over again, you know, and being asked the same questions over and over and over again. It must have been soul destroying. But as a consequence of these interrogations, we get a clearer picture of what it was like in the Hitler bunker at the time, as the walls were closing in, and it was almost the end of the regime. And you know, on the 30th, that some say 2:30, some say 3 o'clock, some say 3:30, that Hitler and his wife Eva Braun decided to unalive themselves, should we say. That's a polite way of putting it, I would say. So anyway, The Death of Hitler by Jean Christopher Brissard and Lana Parshina. This is the paperback version. This is the hardback version. Okay. So we will, let's see. I've got a book here called Commandant of Auschwitz, who was Rudolf Horst. He was the Commandant of Auschwitz. Now I know there was a film made. I can't remember the name of the film off the top of my head, but I do know there was a review by I think it was oh gosh, I forget the reviewer's name, but anyway, they made a film of it, and the Commandant had his house right on the edge of Auschwitz, you know, right on the edge, and he had his family there. He had his wife there, and he had his children there, and they were playing, and all this, you know, death and destruction going on in the camp, and here they were having this kind of normal life, which is almost macabre. So I have this book here, and I already had a copy of this book, and Shane very kindly bought this book for me for Christmas. So it's a Christmas present, so I'm forever grateful, and he signed it for me, so he's just signed it. So I haven't read this book yet, but I will read it because it's the copy that Shane bought for me. So Rudolf Horst, he was the Commandant of Auschwitz, and when they captured him, the British were able to capture him. I mean, they beat him up so badly that I think it was a doctor that had to intervene for fear of that. Well, if you kill him, we won't have, you know, he wouldn't be able to to go to Nuremberg and answer question and cross-examination. They'll cross-examination him. So we got to know the truth of what actually happened in Auschwitz at Nuremberg, or the Nuremberg trials. And then the Polish authorities wanted him because they wanted him to go on trial in Poland, and during that time he was able to write his book, his memoir, and this is it. This is the book that he actually wrote. So when the British actually captured him, it was really good. They didn't kill him, and I suspect that's what they did to Himmler. No, but that's a whole nother video. But with the camp commandant of Auschwitz, by keeping him alive, he was able to give evidence at the trial, at the Nuremberg trials. So we get to know precisely what actually happened at Auschwitz by the commandant, as opposed to, say, an inmate, because that would be a slightly different story, if you see what I mean. So you'd see all behind the scenes and how they came to build Auschwitz and how they were able to do all the exterminating in the gas chambers and so on and so forth. You get the picture. And this book here. It's called Hans and Rudolf, the German Jew and the Hunt for the Commandant of Auschwitz, and you've even got John le Carré at the top. A gripping thriller, an unspeakable crime, and an essential history. So this is a useful book to read in conjunction with this one, because this is where they were looking for Rudolf Höss, and this is that they captured Rudolf Höss, and a result of him being captured, he's written this memoir. So, but this is kind of like the backstory of the capture of this man. In order for me to be able to get the most out of the Rudolf Höss story, I need to read this book. So it might mean that I might have to read these books simultaneously, and perhaps even take notes and see how they collide with each other, because clearly they must have been out to get him. And I mean, with all the destruction in Germany and all the people, from all over Europe that were as a result of the war and of Albert Speer's factories and forced labour and everything, that a lot of people were displaced, and yet they were able to find him. I mean, it's astonishing, really, because he could have taken off to South America like Mengele was able to do. So, but anyway, both great books. Commandant of Auschwitz by Rudolf Höss, which is his memoir, and then Hans and Rudolf, the German Jew and the Hunt for the Commandant of Auschwitz by Thomas Harding. Okay. Now, keeping on the theme of concentration camps, I've got a book here by The Man Who Broke into Auschwitz by Dennis A.V. with Robin Brumby, forwarded by Sir Martin Gilbert. The only reason I brought this book is because it's basically in colour. Now, I do love covers, but there's a YouTuber called Dragon Man, and he has one of the most extraordinary museums, privately owned museums, that I've ever seen, and perhaps in the world. Well, maybe there might be, a millionaire, multi-millionaire who's got his own museum, but he doesn't put it on YouTube, whereas Dragon Man did, And why I mention it is because he has these sections of World War Two paraphernalia. You know, he's got flags, he's got rifles, he's got machine guns, he's got helmets, he's got uniforms. You name it, he's got it. And one of the things he's got is these uniforms, these stripy uniforms that the inmates at these concentration camps were made to wear. And what I noticed, the fact, because I'd never seen them in colour before. I've always seen them in black and white. So they, you know, when you would do these old documentaries, you would see these, you know, those stripy kind of uniforms that they wore. And he's got some, and you see all the badges. You know, the Jews have the Star of David on it, but it was a lot of inmates. It wasn't just Jews in the concentration camps. You had Russian POWs, you had gypsies, you had Jehovah's Witnesses, you had political prisoners, you had homosexuals, and you had people that were wrongly accused. So if say for example your neighbour had a beef with you or something, he could have gone to the Gestapo and accused you of doing one crime or another, and you ended up in a concentration camp. But anyway, going back to Dragon Man, that YouTube channel, you got to see the colour of those stripy, kind of look uniforms or pyjamas as they look like, and the different badges that they wore. So say for homosexual, they'd probably have a pink one or something like that, you know, without being discriminative against those that are homosexual. But it was interesting to see it in colour. That was the thing, because I'd never seen it coloured before. I'd always seen them, you know, from documentaries, black and white documentaries. You never got to see it like I did watching his channel, and hence why I wanted to bring this book, because you get to see this picture in colour. The other thing is that how some of these inmates never threw away their prison uniform. And so if they had they appeared in a documentary, or they appeared at, you know, they went to Eichmann's, you know, when they captured Eichmann's in Israel, and then they went to the trial, and they would then wear that uniform. So they never. It's not like you would say to yourself, well, I'm gonna throw these away, or I'm gonna burn them. They kept them. They actually kept them. So I mean, that really does say a lot. But yeah, that's why I thought I'd mention this book. So, The Man Who Broke into Auschwitz by Dennis Avey. Okay, Executioner Pierrepoint. So Pierrepoint was the hangman. I think he was the last hangman of Britain, and he hung. Not only did he hang lots of people that were condemned, men and women, he hung a lot of war criminals, especially camp guards from the concentration camps. Now I want to do a piece just on Pierrepoint when I get an opportunity to. I'd like to focus a little bit more, not from the point of view of what he did throughout his entire career, but certainly the end of the war. Now I've got in his own writing, I mean, obviously in a book where of all those that were condemned to be hung, he had all their names written down and the crimes that they'd actually committed as a result of the war. But this is the only book on Pierrepoint that I know of, and this is the one that he actually wrote. Fascinating man for someone to do that kind of job, but incredibly he was very, very good at it, as opposed to the hangman that hung all those at Nuremberg. So anyway, I will do a video on Pierrepoint as someone. So there's the book. This is an autobiography. It says Executioner Pierrepoint. Okay, so I have like some fictional books now. I can't say I'm too keen on fictional books, but I know that there is this. My favourite YouTuber is Interesting Books Reviewed. Is this really interesting guy from Texas, and the books that he reviews are fabulous, absolutely fabulous. You've got the opportunity, you want to check out his channel, and he does some fictional books as well. I mean, he's not a big fan of them, but the ones that he has, he reviewed them, and this was one that I wanted to review because, or I wanted to buy because in the synopsis that I read, I could actually see that they were very that the Americans had found out that the Berlin Wall was going to be erected, and yet they didn't really do anything to try and stop it. And I think this was looked upon by the Berliners and by the Germans, and even the German government, or certainly the West German government. Why didn't you try to stop the building of the Berlin Wall? Why didn't you do something about it? And I believe that John F. Kennedy said it's better a wall than a war, and I have to take that view. I think it was just too dangerous to actually engage with the East German regime for fear of a war starting as a result of it, because Berlin could not be defended. It would have been overrun. But this is a fictional account of that time, and I thought what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little read of what it says here, so you get a really understanding of, or at least, and I will as well, before I actually take the time to actually read this book. It says, the day before the Berlin Wall, could we have stopped it? Voices under Berlin, the tale of Monetary Mary. The plot is based on a legend that was still being told by US Army soldiers in Berlin in the mid-70s. According to the legend, we had advanced knowledge of the wall, and we knew that the East German troops who were going to build it had been told to halt construction if the Americans were to take aggressive action to stop them. In Hill's version of the tale, a young American sergeant is the one who gets this piece of intelligence, but he is in East Berlin and has to get back to his unit to report it. The Stasi, the East German secret police, are prepared to kill to keep him from reporting it. They have killed his postmistress and framed him for her murder. Now, it's not only the Stasi and the Vopos, the East German People's Police, but also West Berlin Municipal Polizei and the US Army MPs who are after him. It's the day before construction is scheduled to start, and time is running out, so the sergeant is running as fast as he can. The key question of the novel is, even if he is lucky enough to make it back across the border, will anybody in the West believe what he has to say and take action on it before it's too late? History says that he neither didn't make it nor they didn't believe him. So it says it's written by The Hill, but what that stands for is Thomas Heinrich Edward Hill. So the day before the Berlin Wall, could we have stopped it? A fictional account. All right. We all know what's going on with the war in Ukraine between Russia and, you have to say, the West, which is a proxy war. So we all know that, and that the Ukrainians are being supplied by the West as a consequence of this war. When the Russians went into the Ukraine on February the 24th, 2022. This is a book that I picked up. I got this off of the internet. The reason being is because of its cover. I paid £20 for it. You know, it's one of those, probably these books that are print on demand type books. This book was first written in German. I do not have a German copy. The title will probably be completely different to this one. But the reason I bought the book is that the photo, if you can see that there, that was as a result of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline being blown up. And I remember when Joe Biden was the President of the United States, and Schultz, the Chancellor of Germany at the time, was with him. A reporter asked him if the Russians, and this was just before the war started, if the Russians go into Ukraine, what will you do? And Biden said, we will put an end to the pipeline. And the reporter says, how are you going, Mr. President, how are you going to do this? And he just repeated what he said, we will put an end to it. So you could practically see that it was the Americans that blew up, because you blew up the pipeline. So you have to ask yourself, well, who else could have done it? I mean, you'd need the technology, you'd need the know-how, you'd need the people that can do this kind of thing. You know, they probably require special training. You'd need special equipment, all kinds of things to be able to blow up the Nord Stream pipeline. And this was devastating, and continues to be devastating to the German industry. I mean, the Germans are in a recession right now, and consequently their industry is all coming apart. It's becoming undone. So they're being deindustrialized, and it was as a result of the blowing up of the Nord Stream pipeline. And yet nobody wants to say it. So they all think it, they all know, but nobody speaks up. And I think this is the tragedy of Germany, because Germany is still under occupation. And I've said this before in my other videos, Germany is still under occupation since 1945. So that's 80 years. 1945, or 81 years. As you can see it all around you. I mean, I know that I can. So if I was at the Brandenburg Gate, you look at the Brandenburg Gate and you see right next to it is the American Embassy. Right next to the Brandenburg Gate. You can't get any closer to the very heart and soul of Berlin. And the Americans will have their flag to let everybody know, certainly the German Bundestag, or the Reichstag, which is the German Parliament, which is just across the road, to let the Germans know that the Americans are there. And I believe they know that the Americans blew up that pipeline, and yet they won't say anything, because that is effectively a direction. It is a declaration of war. If you can affect somebody's economy like that, what else could it be? And yet the Germans do nothing. And I believe it's because they are under occupation, and they've been under occupation since 1945. When Berlin was the occupation of Berlin officially and symbolically ended in 1994, the Russians left. The British and the Germans and the French I don't know, but certainly the British and the Germans, certainly the British remained in Germany until 2018, and then they left, but the Americans are still there. And I'm beginning to believe, or at least I always thought, that it must be a thorn in the side of the Germans to know that the Americans are on their land and they won't leave. So, to cut a long story short, that's one of the reasons why I bought this book, because of that photo there, that picture, that cover. That is in the Baltic Sea, where had the pipeline, and they blew it up, and that's was a result of the destruction of one of the pipelines. Certainly, that there is another pipeline that hasn't been destroyed, so that could pump gas into Germany, but as a result of this war, that has stopped. So it'd be nice to read this book, and it's written by an academic from the point of view of the West. You know, that it's not that, and not from the Russian point of view. So it'll have a completely different take. But I'm not bothered about that. I think having browsed through this, there's some really interesting things that I read, and that I'd need to study and take notes. But yeah, I'm glad I got it. So anyway, this is Ukraine and its Western allies, Germany's failure, and the necessary lessons for the future, by Sabine Adler. Okay, that's coming up to the last but one. So this one is The Bomb by Gerard de Groot. I bought this out in the wild, and this is about the nuclear bomb. Now, if we're not careful, it could turn nasty, and we could start firing nuclear weapons, and then it's over for all of us. It's over for all of us. And we've got President Trump, who's a bit of a, well, let's just say, narcissistic, you could say, and unhinged. It's a very worrying times, and I say that because I lived through the Cold War, and when I lived through the Cold War, it was to try. Both sides were always trying to keep the war cold, so it wouldn't get to a nuclear exchange, because it would be the end of all of us. But now it seems so blasé. It's completely flipped from what it was during the Cold War to what it is today. I mean, it's almost like the Europeans are aching for a fight with the Russians, and yet they don't have the armies, they don't have the troops, they don't have the weapons. They can't produce enough weapons in their factories to create an army strong enough to stand up to the Russians. I mean, it's just impossible. And yet they kind of, in their world, their cocooned world, they believe that they have a bone to pick with Russia. And personally, I can't understand why. But I think we now we need to be paying more attention, and at least to find out as much as we can about nuclear destruction, and and what it could do. If there was a nuclear strike, I mean, it would be devastating. I don't know if I can. It's like one of those things where it's like a thought that is so bad, but every time you think it, it makes you depressed. You get into a funk. You start. It's almost like your shoulders start to droop, because it's just so horrible to ever think about it. I mean, during the Cold War, we were always living under this fear that a war could start between us and Russia. And I believe that hopefully it never comes to that, but if it did, the destruction would be so terrifying that it's just beyond one's own imagination to think about and contemplate. So anyway, this is it's called The Bomb, and this is by Gerard de Groot. So just to finish on a lighter note, I've bought a bottle of gin. I know this is going completely against what I've just been describing with all the books that I've got, but this is by Marco Pierri. I think it's Pierrepoint, It's called Mr. White's London Dry Gin. It's 40%. It's a 70 cl. It smells absolutely divine. The nose on it is just, oh, it's fabulous. So if you're into gins, you know, I always say, you know, get a tonic, you know, a Fever Tree or Schweppes, or, you know, maybe another tonic by another name. One of the tricks you could do is to get an ice cube tray, get your tonic, fill up the ice cube tray, put it in the freezing compartment, and get it out and use that. So you have your put a bit of gin in, excuse me, and an ice cube of tonic, and drink it that way. I don't personally drink gin that way. The way I drink gin is in a cocktail. It's really simple to make. I put it in a glass that size. I have half apple juice concentrate. It must be apple juice concentrate, not apple juice drink or apple juice itself. It must be apple juice concentrate, and half sparkling mineral water, and you have like a teaspoon or a spoonful, or maybe 2 spoonfuls, depending on your taste and how you want it. And that should cut through the apple juice, because the apple juice is very sweet, and consequently you want that contrast between the sweetness of the apple juice and the tanginess of the gin. And if you get the right combination, it tastes absolutely divine. So I'd highly recommend it. I've got a few bottles of gin. I've got Gin Mare, which is a Mediterranean gin that comes from Spain. I've got Cotswolds gin, which is a regional gin. It's actually one of my favourite gins. I've got Corsican lemon and it's Corsican lemon and Edelflower. I think it's Edelflower. That's very nice too. So has a very unique taste to it, and I always have it the same way. I might, you know, do some more investigating, find out of what other cocktail I could make with the gins. But yeah, I bought this because I recognised the name Marco Pierrepoint, who I think was Gordon Ramsay. He was like he taught Gordon Ramsay, or was a mentor to Gordon Ramsay. And Gordon Ramsay, of course, is this famous celebrity chef that is recognised all around the world for you know his shouting and screaming in these TV shows of you know, in all the restaurants that he appears in all around the world. You know, I'm not into that kind of thing. I can't say I'm into Gordon Ramsay, but that was one of the reasons why I chose to buy this gin. So that concludes my presentation today. I hope you're all well. I hope you're getting through these turbulent times, because these are turbulent times right now. You know, we don't know how things are going to turn out with everything that's going on around the world, but I hope you're thinking nice thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Please leave us a comment. You know, I haven't had any comments. It'd be nice to have someone to write one comment at least, you know, saying that they enjoyed the video, or maybe there might be an idea of a new video that they'd like me to present at one time or another. So with that, auf Wiedersehen, alles Gute und fall nicht nieder.